Good evening. Welcome to the April General Meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Cheryl Gannon, and I'm the president of the Civic Fed. Tonight, we will begin with our speaker, and then we have to start first with our routine business. First is approval of the agenda, which was published on page 2 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Seconded.
Thank you.
For Pete's sake.
Is any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, there's discussion.
Go ahead, Peggy. Peggy, go ahead.
Peggy, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to suggest that we not vote on the proposed amendments to the bylaws this evening, that be tabled for further consideration in the future.
Okay, so that's out of order. Our bylaws are not can't be
They're
tabled.
part of the agenda.
Right, they can't be tabled, though. Tabling it would be out of order, but we can vote on the agenda. All those in favor of the agenda as it's printed, please say aye.
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 All those opposed, say no.
No.
Oh,
So here,
No.
I've heard 4 no's. The agenda is adopted as printed. Next is approval of the minutes of the March general membership meeting, which were printed on pages 25 to 26 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, please say nay. Any abstentions? The minutes are approved. Next is the treasurer's report. Jerry Garson's our treasurer. Go ahead, Jerry.
we operate on a fiscal year from July 1, 2024 through June 30th, 2025. We've collected $2,204 of dues. I just got a check in yesterday on Saturday from the town of Somerset, and there's something that came in today for $65 dues, but I'm not sure who it's from. We had expenditures so far this year of $1,848, giving us a net income for the period of $356. If anyone has any questions, please contact me at a later date.
What's the balance?
The balance is $6,963.
Thank you, Jerry. Now I'm going to turn it over to Joyce Gladys to introduce our speaker tonight.
Okay. Our guest speaker is Angie
I
McCarthy.
have a question with the treasurer's report. I raised my hand.
Okay, I didn't see it. Go ahead, Luella.
I just wondered, as part of your report, I know we're working and diligently on increase our membership. Could you tell us exactly what our membership is now in terms of a total homeowner associations?
There are 53 member associations.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, our guest speaker is Angie McCarthy, who is Nature Forward's Maryland conservation advocate. For those of you who don't recognize the name Nature Forward, it was formerly Audubon. She joined the Nature Forward team in July 2024, and she's immersed herself in learning about things like responsible data center development, tree canopy, and forest conservation laws, and county stormwater issues. Prior to joining Nature Forward, she was a legislative aide to Councilman Andrew Friedson, where she worked on environmental matters. She left Councilman Friedson's office to join the New Columbia Solar, which is solar panels. And after New Columbia Solar, last July, she came to Nature Forward. Welcome, Angie.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I apologize in advance for my creaky voice. I'm getting over a cold, but we'll get started here, and feel free to use the chat to ask any questions, and I'll try to read them as I'm going along and answer them, but we'll also have some time for a Q&A after. And I'm going to share my screen now.
Here we go.
Okay. That should have worked. So, like Joyce said, I am happy to join you all and talk a little bit about data centers, uh, and give you a brief overview of what data centers are, what the issues are in Maryland and Virginia, and what we can do going forward. As Joyce said, Nature Forward used to be the Audubon Naturalist Society, so we're actually the oldest environmental nonprofit in the DMV, and we were founded in 1897. And I have the great privilege of being the Maryland Conservation Advocate. You can see a nice photo of me from my first day when I still had long hair. And we are looking at many different areas depending on being in DC, Maryland, or Virginia. Data centers being one that really concerns us in Maryland and Virginia. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to do is run through agenda. So we'll do a quick temperature check just so I know what you all know about data centers so I can try to be more helpful. Do an overview of what data centers are, look at Virginia, look at Maryland, and then we will look forward. So just as a way for me to understand what you all know, has anyone seen a data center? And feel free to use the raise hand tool or use the chat box, and if anyone's able to also say like if they know what a data center is and what we're talking about today. Okay, seen a couple hands. Does anyone happen to know why there are so many in Northern Virginia? And feel free to come off mute if you have a question or if you have an answer to that.
It's the data center of the world, and most of the internet traffic goes through Northern Virginia and Loudoun and Fairfax County.
Yeah, mostly Loudoun, a little more Prince William at this point. Yeah, thank you for that. And part of that reason is actually for a cheeky thing called AOL back in the day. AOL was founded in Loudoun County, and that set up Northern Virginia to have the infrastructure for Virginia and Northern Virginia in particular to become the powerhouse for data centers. And I would be remiss if I did not have a big old caveat uh, on top of this presentation, and that's that Nature Forward is not explicitly against data centers or data center development in general. We would not be able to have this Zoom call without data centers. I would not be able to house the 15 gigabytes of photos of my dog without data centers. So they are necessary for our current technology. We need them as a utility. However, we do need some common sense guardrails, which is what I'm going to be talking about today. As I said, and Alan, I think that was you answering about Nova being the kind of the epicenter of data centers. What you can see here is actually a map of the different fiber optic cables that go beneath the ocean for the internet. And I think it's really interesting to look at this map. I majored in geography, so I'm a map nerd at heart to see how internet moves, because to us and to many of us, we just think of it as a thing that happens, but there's a lot of physical infrastructure that goes through it. Some other reasons why Nova is the epicenter of data centers is because of these seabed fiber optic cables, but also because Virginia has relatively cheap power, which is something we're going to keep coming back to. And Virginia has really lax state and local regulations, and tons of subsidies in order to bring in data centers. So, Nova's current data centers from 2023 and equal about 2,522 megawatts of energy. I'll give you some context from my solar days. If we were to put rooftop solar on top of a regular sized DC office building, that's only about 100 kilowatts of energy. So we need a huge scale of energy to power data centers. So for solar, if we only did solar, that would be 835 acres of solar, which is the equivalent of 18,000 homes. For coal, the equivalent of nearly 300,000 homes. For natural gas, even more, nearly 400,000 homes. And for a nuclear plant, 450,000 homes. And finally, wind. And obviously, each of these come with their own limitations, but hopefully, this gives you a little bit of a sense of scale of how much energy is needed to power data centers. In addition to these really large energy impacts, are the transmission lines and substations. I don't know if any of you on here have heard about MPRP, or the Piedmont Reliability Project that is going through Frederick County. But that transmission line would be taking carbon generated power from Pennsylvania and West Virginia, going through Maryland and powering the data centers that are currently in Northern Virginia. So that's why if you see anything in the news about that and why people are having fuss, because it's going to be transmission lines that are impacting Maryland and a lot of private farmers and private landowners, but we aren't getting any of the benefit from the energy that is transported through it. So a little bit of a tidbit on that if you're reading about it. Data centers also all require backup generators, many of which are diesel, and we just don't know what the impacts are in terms of pollution, noise, and what constant noise does to a community when it's right outside your door. Evaporative cooling is a huge issue. I think with data centers, all the biggest thing I've learned is
Unmute.
you can either. Oh, sorry, Jerry. Oh, okay, never mind. You can either have something that is extremely energy efficient, but it will be water inefficient. And then on the other side, you can have something that's very water efficient and extremely energy inefficient. You're always going to have some sort of setback in terms of your resources. So it's really about what you're willing to give up and what you're willing to pay for. And obviously, we have some impacts on noise and lighting. If any of you have driven around Loudoun County, all of those buildings have lights on 24/7 because they are constantly running and there's constantly staff and security. So we need to think more about if you are someone who lives right next to Data Center Alley, what's it going to be like if you're just trying to sleep and you have essentially a football field on every single side of your home just blaring into your house, and what's that going to do to your mental health and your overall well-being? And a lot of these impacts aren't known right now. Thankfully, at Nature Forward, we were just able to recently talk with one of the premier researchers for health impacts, and I'll drop that link for you all in the chat after this, in case you're interested on the health impacts of data centers. All right, I will do a really quick interview of Virginia. Feel free to boo the whole time, but we have to mention them in a data center conversation. So this headline is from October 2024, and I'll just give you all a moment to read it. But it does say that data centers are the largest growth in power demand since World War II. So this is likely the largest development issue and also largest utility issue that is going to happen in my lifetime. This is not something that is very trivial. This is something, it's really an all hands on deck situation with zoning, with energy folks, with climate advocates, with business folks, and it really makes you think. And with data centers driving this amount of power demand, clean energy cannot keep up. We cannot put in as much solar, nuclear, wind to keep up with this. And so we are having to use and keep online coal power plants. We're having to do more natural gas peakers in order to meet this demand. And this is another map from our good friends at the Piedmont Environmental Council, who have put the both the current and the proposed data centers in Virginia. So, um, I don't know if I mentioned this before, but it's estimated that about 70% of the world's internet traffic goes through Nova. So all of these, uh, both light red and dark red dots are today's internet. I think the second highest concentration is in Beijing. A little circle there for y'all. So this is a nice little graphic of what Data Center Alley looks like for folks who maybe have not made their way down to Loudoun. So you'll see a lot of single family homes right next to these really large windowless buildings. And I only included this just to show how much this changes a landscape. And when we think about Montgomery County, when we think about Nova, these are not places where, like, oh man, this is a really affordable place to live. That is not a thought that ever occurs when we think about these counties outside of DC, where land is such a precious commodity. And I think with a lot of this data center conversation, we have to think about, is this the best use for this extremely expensive land when we're thinking about our affordable housing crisis, when we're thinking about the need for parks and natural spaces, the need for more schools and overcrowding. So it's good to think about what this scale looks like more. All right, we're mentally preparing to cross the Potomac north to Maryland, which is where my expertise is. Um, if you look at the Maryland website, uh, I just point this out as something funny because as Virginia's data center attracts more opposition, developers are starting to look at Maryland. And Maryland is open for business. This is on our public-facing website, and Governor Westmore and his administration are really welcoming this screenshot. And actually, one of the location advantages is our lovely environment, which I just think is a little bit ironic. And it's always good to know what's public facing and then what's not. In particular, a key industry that was not listed on the Maryland website is biomedical companies or entrepreneurial companies, but they listed for data centers. So I think it's good to think about who your government wants to get business from. All right. I talked a little bit about diesel generators before. This is a kind of a quick schematic of what the data center history in Maryland has looked like. And a lot of this has centered around Quantum Loophole, which is in Frederick. And Quantum Loophole has been touted as kind of like the creme de la creme of data centers in that they are trying to do things right. And I think that to some extent is true. Uh, but Maryland has quite a few laws and also a lack of laws that really ensure that they are doing the best that they can because we have so few regulations for data centers. Maryland currently only has 28 data centers, 15 of which are in Baltimore. And data centers are really spread out in Nova, but we don't really know what's going on here. The legislative fight, as I said, started with Quantum Loophole, and the fact that the PSC kind of pulled out, the Public Service Commission pulled out a environmental waiver for this particular project. And I think as you look at the headlines regarding data centers and Governor Westmore, they kind of flip-flop. Sometimes he will say he's all for the environment in Maryland, and then in the next move might approve a bill that allows for generators to have diesel for the backup generators. So it's sometimes flip-flops, which means that we get really large campuses like Quantum Loophole. All right. So this is a very speculative industry. If you follow data center news at all, you might see articles like these pop up. So we don't know exactly what's going to happen, but we just know it's probably going to be pretty bad. Especially when we have so many bills that are eroding our rights as residents, and communities to weigh in on what happens. A couple months ago, I was in Prince George's County against one of their county bills, 52, that would have made the permitting process for data centers more streamlined. And they streamlined it by taking out all the community input. So I think it's just good for all of us to be aware of what's happening on a local legislation level. All right, wrapping up here. No, we have questions. So what's next? Some things to keep in mind. The ratepayer impacts because of this energy shortfall that we're going to be seeing. The OPC actually put out the Maryland Office of People's Counsel put out a report that said that people could be seeing a 2 to 28% increase in their energy bills within the next year. And obviously, this is coming at a cost of living crisis for so many people, and it's obviously really worrisome. Nuclear is a huge question. I recently went to a data center conference where all the developers said, "Well, we don't have to worry because we can just build a nuclear plant." For those of you who might have lived through the heyday of nuclear, we are not in that right now. There are so many siting conversations that need to happen about that and safety precautions. And I don't think nuclear is the silver bullet that they say it is, but I could be wrong. I'm not gonna count myself out there. Obviously, there are climate goals that we need to consider when talking about data centers, especially as it pertains to the need for coal plants to stay open and natural gas plants coming online in order to support data center energy needs. As I said before, we also really don't know what the health impacts of data centers are going to be, from the noise to the air pollution and all of those things. I do have some good news from Maryland General Assembly. We had a data center study bill pass this just last week during crossover, or I'm sorry, sine die. And that is going to look at the impact from an economic and environmental standpoint of data centers in Maryland, and hopefully using that data, legislators will be able to put in appropriate guardrails that are realistic and fair. And I didn't want to end on doom and gloom, so I will say that there is a way forward. In Europe, they have the European Energy Efficiency Directive, which is like our study bill, but just extremely hopped up. So data centers will have to report on all of these things that you see. So incoming and outgoing traffic, their power and water usage, their renewable energy usage, their cooling effectiveness ratio. So Europe is already doing this for a large number of their data centers, and they're using that in order to legislate how the industry grows in the future. So there definitely is hope for how we can kind of wrangle this unwieldy beast. We just have to make sure that we're applying pressure on our legislators to use data for their development. And yeah, definitely would like to learn more about the consumer data protections and kind of the electronic personal data regulations, especially because so much of the internet goes through Nova. And I see some hands, so I'll skip. I can take those now, or I can skip to the end and do questions. Carrie, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. I'm an electrical contractor. So I've gone to several, I guess, focus group meetings, forums, because they're trying to prepare us, for
Mhm.
the advent of these data centers. And what we're told, I mean, what we've learned is that the state of Maryland today purchases 40% of all of our power from other states. Okay. And with the advent of the electric vehicle charging stations, and of course, hot tubs that pretty much hit quite a few homes in the area, we're exceeding our demand capability at the moment. But what they've told us is that the future is micro nuclear power generation, which are small, compact, power plants that are safer than any nuclear power plant that's ever been built because it doesn't use water to cool its reactor. It uses hydrogen. So are you suggesting that that's not the direction that I do know that we're still a few years off before Westinghouse and the large corporations actually build, or successfully build marketable micronuclear power generation equipment, but we're almost there. I mean, Angie, could you inform us? I mean, am I wrong?
Let me address several things. So, number one, I think from your perspective, I also just wanted to point out that for everything that we've been championing, in terms of the construction, from the electrical to the laying down the cement, we've been trying to make it clear that we want good union jobs, or good local jobs to be used for all of these data center construction. But in terms of your question about the small nuclear modular reactors, I am not saying that that's not the direction that we're going to go. I've heard a ton about the SMDs, and at this point, as Nature Forward, we don't have a position on nuclear yet because while we need the energy, I would love to see a show of hands of folks here who are okay with that being built in their backyard. And all of you are civically engaged. You might have more resources to have a conversation like this. And what we don't want to see happen, Carrie, is having communities that are already disproportionately disenfranchised, who don't have access to lawyers, who don't have access to community meetings on a random Monday night, to have nuclear reactors built in their backyard and they don't know it. I think that's our biggest concern right now, is having equitable siting. So I think that is kind of a different conversation than, is that the future? I've heard from a lot of different folks about if that's the direction that's going. And yeah, so let me keep going. Jeff, is your question related to the EED?
Yes. Well, no,
Okay.
not the EED. It's somewhat related, but if you want to finish, go ahead. I'll do my question after you're done.
Okay, Jerry, is that okay with you too?
I think he
Yeah,
said yes.
okay. I was just going to ask, maybe I'll give you the question now. Currently, Pepco, a source of energy where we live, PG&E has a very small amount of Montgomery County, and the northern part uses a major system. But Pepco currently gets 15% of its electricity from coal. Our governor and all our other elected officials have said we want to get rid of gas stoves, we want to get rid of gas heating, we want to ban new stoves for gas heating, and we'd like to go to electric cars. Where are we going to get the electricity just for their proposals, assuming we don't add a single data center into Maryland? But we currently don't have the system, and everyone's opposed to solar. We see Ocean City opposed to windmills. We're going to have to burn more coal for every new Tesla that someone buys, and every new gas stove that someone puts in. And they're talking about apartment houses have to get rid of their gas system and only use electricity. Where are we going to get the electricity if we don't put the transmission lines in Maryland?
I'm gonna hold that until the end, just so I can get through these. But thank you for your question, Jerry, and Jeff, I'll come back to you
Yeah,
in a moment.
Go ahead, Angie, and finish your presentation.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so I touched on this quickly with Carrie's question, but just wondering, hearing from you folks, how data centers might be an equity issue, based on what I've said thus far.
Well,
And feel free to use the chat or come off mute.
I'll come off mute for a second. If you want to talk about equity, right now we are facing the biggest revenue crisis that this country's seen. And in the Washington metropolitan area, the one jurisdiction that's actually lowering their property taxes is Loudoun County. And the only reason why they can do that is because they are heavily taxing and I'm not speaking in favor of data centers. I'm just talking about the reality of what exists, because they are taxing heavily the data center industry. So they're actually lowering their property taxes, and they claim that ultimately it's going to go down for the next several years. So I don't know. From an equitable standpoint, it sure would be nice to have an outside source help us, because we had a 5.7% increase in taxes 2 years ago, and this year I've heard everything from 3.7 to 7% increases. So, I mean, who knows what's going to happen there? That's my 2 cents on equity.
Anyone else? Okay. Well, obviously, so Carrie kind of talked about this, but just the price of things. So we have ratepayer impacts. Also with the amount of water that is used by data centers, we are likely to see water scarcity and climate change impacts. And as we've seen in the past, this is going to impact our poorest and our most vulnerable populations first. And as we were talking about with the small modular reactors, richer neighborhoods are always going to be able to get more lawyers and stir up more of a fuss, as it pertains to energy that is sited near their homes. And not all neighborhoods are able to afford this or really even have access to the knowledge of that. So, and then more broadly speaking, just dirty power plants staying online or being built will disproportionately impact localities that are not benefiting from the economic boost in data centers. So while Loudoun County might be getting a tax break, the communities in Pennsylvania and West Virginia that are having to burn the coal, burn the fossil fuels to get that energy down to Loudoun, they are not the ones that are getting an economic boost. So the rich will continue to get richer, the poor will continue to get sicker. Okay, so if you are ginned up after this conversation, we have multiple ways for you to get involved. Please feel free to use the QR code, and I'll also put it in the chat to sign up for our action alerts. I will send you personal emails that are very interesting and very brief about ways that you can impact data center development in Montgomery County and Maryland. But educating yourself, like now, educating decision makers, and advocating for common sense regulations. So, not allowing for by right approvals, making sure data centers are not within a mile of the metro, and generators shouldn't be near our communities. And I hate to end on a personal plea, but limit your use of AI. Every time someone does a generative AI search, it's like taking my water bottle, 8 of these, and that water goes out of our system. So it's an incredibly water intensive process. So limiting your use is helpful. And then in terms of future events, we have a lovely event at Wood End in Chevy Chase about the transformative power of nature and how nature can make us all feel like we belong. And I'll send event details about that. And I have my email, so I'll stop sharing and I can take questions now.
Okay, so before we go to questions, we've been asked in the chat if you will share your PowerPoint with me, if you can email it to Joyce, and then we will share it with the members. There's several that would like to have it.
Okay, perfect. And oh, sorry, I missed most of the chat. I could not see those and present at
That's
the same
okay, if
time.
you just share the PowerPoint with me. Okay, we'll go to Jeff Griffith now.
Angie, my question is this, assuming the legislature adopts some of the reporting that you've highlighted, that would be helpful. What guardrails, to use your term, is Nature Forward recommending that we begin to install or ensure that they are in place? I'm sorry, but I don't think suggesting that I stop using AI is going to have much of an effect. I don't even know when I'm using AI half the time, as I'm sure you know. Um, that's a function of the way the technology world will go. So
Mhm.
what is Nature Forward recommending that once we collect all this data and educate ourselves, what are they recommending that the guardrails be?
Yeah, so I just listed out a couple of them. I think in my conversations with local legislators, so making sure that data centers are not where people should be. For a lot of data centers, they only employ about 10 to 20 people. Um, so they don't necessarily need to be next to a metro. So making sure that they are also not in areas where they might be really impactful to a community, like I said, with the diesel generators and the light pollution and the air pollution that directly comes from there. Um, the companies that install data centers and construct them generally have a lot of money. And there are places like Amazon and Google, and we would like to hold them to a standard to use construction methods that are keeping jobs in the local economy, that are using the best technology available. I'm sure some of you have read a little bit about the NVIDIA chip and the different AI tools that are more efficient, that are more environmentally friendly, that use less water, that use less energy. And we want to hold these large multinational corporations to a high standard when it comes to construction. So those are some of the things, and you stopping your use of AI, of course, is not gonna be the end all be all. It's just part of your common practice of what you can actually control. I'm assuming that you are not the CEO of Google or Amazon. Otherwise, I'd be making a much more different plea. However, it's just like recycling your milk bottle at this point.
In full disclosure, my daughter is an executive with Google, but she and I don't discuss these matters. But
Well, maybe you
that,
should.
but let me just say that all of those are sound practices, but it doesn't address the enormous energy issue that you raised at the very beginning. If we're going to
No.
build these AI centers, the energy need is going to be there, even if they put them far away from people, nowhere near a metro, and meet all of your other criteria. So isn't the energy issue in some ways the most fundamental issue that has to be addressed?
Yes.
And your recommendations, the
Based on
guardrail
energy?
about how to
Well,
cut back on the how to live in a world where data centers are going to grow.
mhm.
Yes, we need to go to clean. Is the recommendation that we insist they only use clean energy? Is that what you're going to propose?
It's what we've been proposing. It's what we've been fighting for this past General Assembly with the ACE Act, the Renew Act. Uh, there's not such a hurry that we need to bring on gas pipelines and coal pipelines for energy. Obviously, we're going to be hitting a shortfall soon, as I think as Carrie mentioned, Maryland is a net importer of 40% of our energy mix, which comes from largely um, fossil fuel burning sources. So yeah, I think we need to put on a ton more solar, a ton more wind. And I think people don't really like hearing about wind and they don't like hearing about nuclear, but we're gonna have to find some sort of energy mix. And
Okay.
Leslie, yes, I agree with you. It's not a practical solution, which is why I put a big old caveat that I don't think it's practical. Jeff, you've said that as well. It's one small thing that you can control, though. Any other questions?
We have a few
Uh,
things in the chat about water sources and the use of the Potomac River. Can you comment a little more on that?
I am looking for the question. Would you mind
Well,
reading out?
yeah. So first, someone made a comment. Virginia does not own the Potomac River. Maryland does, but Virginia went to court to get access and is now giving out water like candy to cool down the data centers. And then someone else came in and said, can you speak more about the water sources and usage of water by these plants?
Yes, I certainly can. I am trying to find it. I can try to find it in my notes, but I think there was an Amazon data center in Louisa County, Virginia, that was using something like 600,000 gallons of potable water every day. Um, and that has raised a lot of questions in terms of what happens when we're in a drought, like what we were this past summer, and who gets priority on water. If there's more of a nuance to that water question, happy to answer it, but it's in the hundreds of thousands of gallons of drinking water.
So Al
Angie?
Myers wants to know, what do you do with the spent nuclear fuel?
That's a great question. I have no idea. I will
Okay.
need to get back to you about that. I have a meeting on Thursday with a nuclear policy advisor, but again, as I said, Nature Forward does not currently have a position on nuclear because we are still learning and trying to get a handle on it.
Angie, I don't mean to monopolize your time. Um, I don't have a dog in this fight. 'Cause I'm actually getting ready to retire shortly as an electrical contractor, and my work is residential. It's not we don't. I have to go to these classes because it's a requirement if you're a master electrician. But what I've been told, and this is what I'm trying to
Oh,
convey
Carrie, I'm
here.
going to interrupt you because Dan was in line ahead of you and we don't have.
No, I was in head, and somehow are we going to argue about this? Because I
Dan, go ahead.
I'm happy to cede 2 minutes to just wrap up this discussion so we can settle the issue and then proceed to my question. Please go ahead.
okay. As I was saying, these micronuclear power generation plants, they're going to be cooled not by water, but by hydrogen. Okay. Also, the from what I understand from going to these classes, these things, we're still in the early stages of these power generation these plants, and I suspect that they're going to be dealing with hydrogen to cool data centers as well in the near future. They told us in the class that they're still a few years away. Furthermore, I what Jerry said earlier is very important. Today, we're purchasing 40% of our electricity from outside sources. They expect to have there was legislation that was going to push electric vehicles to be the only car sold in 2027. I don't know. I'm sure Trump is going to push that off, but we are nowhere prepared to deal with an entire universe of electric vehicle charging stations in the state of Maryland. I can tell you that right now. So they know we're at a critical point. What the solution is going to be, I think, is still yet to be determined. I think it will be micronuclear, but I think that the final engineering on that is probably a couple of years away, to be perfectly honest with you, Angie. But like I said, I don't have a dog in this fight.
Do you have a question in there, Carrie?
What kind of? I was hoping to hear your thoughts on that. Am I being correct, or I mean, am I on the right direction or what?
I don't feel comfortable answering that. Question about EV vehicles, about small nuclear reactors. As I said, we don't have a position on that yet, so I'll table that one for right now. But thank you for your comment.
Okay, Dan, go ahead.
Thank you so much. And as far as the small nuclear power that's hydrogen cooled, there's no point in having this conversation until we have an insurance company willing to underwrite the project. Because as it stands, every single nuclear power plant in this country is underwritten by the taxpayer. That means any kind of accident, the taxpayer is on the hook. Any kind of litigation, the taxpayer is on the hook. So until we see an insurance company willing to cover small nuclear that's hydrogen powered, I don't know if it makes sense to talk about it at length. As far as the water use by data centers, I think, Angie, is the guardrail that we were asking about. What guardrails could be used? Because right now, half of all the water that we take out of the Potomac River is used for energy generation. Okay,
Hmm.
half of all the water from the Potomac River. If somebody wants to look up Mount Storm, it's owned by Dominion Energy. It takes out like 1 million gallons a day, I think, at least. But the current projections with data centers is that they're going to double the amount of water taken out from the river. So it's already half of all the water taken out from the river, and we have projections that the water used by data centers is going to double our, withdrawal of water from the river. And then we're in a 3-year drought. And much of the Potomac River watershed has been suffering from various levels of drought for 3 years now. So the guardrail, it would make sense to be the withdrawal permits because the data centers have to get permits to withdraw the water from the river to cool the computers. And
Yep.
so that seems like a reasonable guardrail to leverage for the civic community that wants better regulation of these data centers. We simply don't have the water for more data centers. And the way that the water volumes in the Potomac River has been going, I am predicting water use restrictions in the next 2 to 3 years. I'm sorry to say.
So I think your question there is water use permits part of our guardrails that we are
Yeah.
proposing?
Is it part of your
Yes.
advocacy? Because that's really the water use permit is where the rubber hits the road.
Yes.
They can't have a data center without using the water, and we don't have the water. We just
Yeah.
don't have the water. So that seems to be the crux of the matter, and the should be the focus of advocacy efforts for various organizations, not just environmental groups, but also the Civic Federation, which is concerned not just with the environmental aspects, but with the economy and with the fiscal health of our jurisdiction. So.
Hmm. No, so water use permits is definitely part of the advocacy. We've also talked about closed circuit cooling. Um, and the new NVIDIA Blackwell chip has sorry, my dog is getting restless. If you hear her jingling in the back, is talking about direct to chip cooling. Reward. Direct to chip cooling, which means that water is going directly on the chip, so it actually uses less water. So it's definitely part of what we're proposing. This is a little bit out of the time, sort of thing. Hopefully that answers your question. I'm just gonna open the door for her really quick, and I'll be Ken, if you would like to say your question, then I can answer it.
Sorry, it's a oops, trying to unmute myself here. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you, yes.
Angie?
Yes, Ken.
Go ahead and
All right.
speak.
Can Angie hear me?
Yeah, she's just opening the
Sure
door.
can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's a comment about the direct to chip cooling. That's not new. I mean, people shouldn't think that's new technology. That's been going on for decades and decades. I used to work for a large computer company. But the issue I would raise was yes, it's very efficient. It's like a radiator around the chip, and the fact that it's a closed circuit, that's good. It doesn't use up any water, but that heat has to go somewhere. And where does it
Mhm.
go? it goes out in the air. So when you do that, then you have to have huge air conditioning systems for your computer rooms. I mean, there are ways to vent it outside, but then, it goes to the outside. So there's no free lunch. It's thermodynamics. So that's all.
Yep, yep. And can I'm not sure if you heard kind of my bad analogy of you either get better water efficiency or get better energy efficiency, but you're correct on that point.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, last question, Jerry Garson.
Wouldn't a simple solution be requiring anyone who needs to build a data center to have to pay for large reservoirs so they can take the water out of the Potomac whenever it's close to flood stage and put some restrictions in like that? That would be the easiest restriction. And when you tell a data center, oh, you got to build a giant reservoir, they'll start saying, okay, I don't want to do that. But I think the water management is the whole trick, to require that any new data center have adequate storage for not only theirs, but everyone else's use of water. Because at times when you have a storm, the water goes into the Potomac River, then it goes into the Atlantic Ocean. So you stop the water from going there, you'd have the water when you need it, when there are things. So just require large reservoirs be built. And you'd be surprised how no one would build a data center. That might be the simple solution. Maybe I'm wrong. Am I missing something?
I am not going to say you're wrong, Jerry, because I don't know you very well. We just met. But I think the part of that conversation assumes that we as the county have much leverage and have much power in these conversations. I think Carrie brought up how Loudoun is able to lower their property tax rate because of data centers. I showed you the Maryland state website. Maryland is open for business for data centers. Every single, or not every single, many states are doing their best to deregulate the data center development environment to welcome in these companies because we want their tax dollars. Short and simple. I think the reservoir situation, another so-called simple solution has been, oh, just make sure that they're the ones who pay for their transmission lines, make sure that they're the ones paying for their own energy distribution. That all assumes that we have any sort of leverage against them because our states and our counties are either putting in pro data center legislation or they're not doing anything at all and just welcoming them in because we are all swayed by the kind of allure of tax dollars. So I think you're not wrong, Jerry. There is some simple solutions, but I think the dynamics are unfortunately much more complex.
Okay, thank you, Angie, very much. We might